Our politics lead now. Now, Hasan Piker might not be a household name, at least among adults, but ask your kids. His new role as a midterm surrogate for some Democrats is proof that his political influence is expanding far beyond the streaming platform Twitch, where he has taken up residence. He is, without question, an online influencer with nearly 3 million followers. His rise as a prominent voice on the left is now driving a wedge between Democrats, and for good reason. Hasan Piker's past and present is checkered with controversial, if not outrageous, if not bigoted state comments like this one.
America deserved 9/11, dude. F it. I'm saying it. We totally brought it on ourselves, dude. Holy shit.
The ultra-Orthodox Jews leaving Israel, hilarious. Okay? If they serve in the military and then they get their untrained, inbred asses shipped into southern Lebanon, again, very funny.
You know, it's Hasan Piker calling Orthodox Jews inbred. Piker has also posted comments such as these, where he unequivocally sides with Hamas, calling them the lesser of two Israels compared to the lesser of two evils compared to the government of Israel. Piker has since apologized for his comments on 9/11, but he stood by the rest. He's accusing others of taking him out of context. In a Wall Street Journal op-ed, the leaders of the Democratic think tank Third Way write, quote, "Mr. Piker is anti-American, anti-women, anti-Western, and anti-Semitic. No Democrat should engage with him. All should seek to push him to the fringe where he belongs," unquote. Hasan Piker just recently become an issue in Michigan. It's home to a competitive three-way Democratic primary for governor. Dr. Abdul al-Sayed, one of the three candidates and a former CNN commentator, announced that Piker will join him for 2 rallies in April. His opponents quickly seized on that, slamming the decision as unacceptable, calling Piker not somebody that you should be campaigning with at a moment when there's clearly a lot of pain and trauma across our state. Our Donnie O'Sullivan caught up with Piker over the weekend at a No Kings rally in New York and asked how he fits into the Democratic Party's future.
You have become an issue within the Democratic Party yourself. Tell us about that.
I don't think I'm necessarily an issue within the Democratic Party as much as I am an issue for a lot of consultants. I don't want fascism to win in this country. I don't want Republicans to win in this country. We can argue on the methods. Maybe you think that my worldview and my values and the policies that I want politicians to represent might be different than yours. But at the end of the day, I think we have the same goals.
I should note, I misspoke. It's a Michigan Senate primary, not governor primary. Jonah Platt is with us. He's the host of Being Jewish with Jonah Platt podcast. Peter Hamby is the founding partner of Puck News. And Peter, look, obviously he has said a lot of things that a lot of people find outrageous, and he called one Jew a Zionist pig dog. He has called Hamas the Palestinian resistance. He has justified October 7th, and on and on and on. What does his influence tell you about where the Democratic Party stands today? And I guess, is it despite those comments or because of those comments?
I think it's despite those comments a little bit. I mean, back to your first question, what it says about the party. I think Dr. Abdul al-Sayed is looking for a lane in a 3-way primary. He is slightly behind in the polling. And like a lot of Democrats and a lot of progressives, after the 2024 election, wants to connect with young people, connect with young men, go into the manosphere, go into the podcast space. It just so happens that Hasan Piker is aligned with a lot of Dr. Abdul al-Sayed's views on healthcare, on taxing the rich and billionaires, etc. He is a Bernie, AOC, Zoran guy. But with that, he has a long reputation of saying all of the things you just played here. I was just talking to you before the segment. I mean, I think it is a risk for Abdul al-Sayed to have him come into the state. It's an obvious risk, but he is grasping for votes in a crowded 3-way primary in a state, Michigan, which you remember from 2024, both in the primary, the Democratic primary and the general election, has a lot of Arab and Muslim voters outside of Detroit, in Dearborn Heights, and Democrats have been suffering there, and I think he's trying to grab onto them. He's doing rallies at Michigan, in Michigan State, so he's trying to go after young people. But one thing I do want to point out, Jake, that you said in the intro, that he's not a household name, the Speaking with American Men project, which was launched to study young men by Democrats after 2024, polled Hasan Piker's name among young men. He's not well known at all. About half of young people don't know who he is. And then his favorable rating, he's -9%. He's underwater with faves. Only 20% of young men have a favorable opinion of Hasan Piker. And that's sort of why I say, is it worth the gamble to do this?
Interesting. And Joni, in that Wall Street Journal op-ed that I talked about, the think tank Third Way, they wrote, "We're all for a big tent, but the Democratic Party needs to draw a line in the sand. Hasan Piker and his fellow Jew haters belong on the other side." Donny O'Sullivan asked Piker to respond to critics who call him anti-Semitic. He quoted a few things that Piker had said, especially a Zionist dog or Zionist pig, or I think the actual quote was Zionist pig dog, whatever that means. Here is Piker's response.
I've spent my entire professional media career and far beyond that combating anti-Semitism. I've been doxxed, swatted by neo-Nazis for my consistent advocacy against anti-Semitism. I just also happen to be an avowed anti-Zionist. I believe Zionism is a very racist ideology. It's an ethno-religious supremacist ideology, and it's the underpinning ideology that has caused the genocide of Palestinians in the hands of Israel and also the United States of America.
Jonah, there's a lot to unpack there. What's your response?
Yeah, I mean, what Piker does that a lot of people of his ilk do is they try to inoculate themselves against claims of Jew hatred by pointing it out in places that aren't them. He's been very clear pointing things out on the right. Oh, that's anti-Semitism. These are the tropes they use. And then he'll use the exact same tropes and just sub-Jew for Israel, which is the place where all Jews collectively have a connection to, and is the homeland where more than 50% of Jews on planet Earth live. So it's not, he would never say Jews control the media, but Israel controls the media. And, you know, the Jews didn't pull us into the war with Iran and control the American government, but Israel does. And so he's able to sort of get away with some of this stuff in these subtle ways when really his impact is just as harmful as any out-and-out anti-Semite. Just he's got a different name and he comes from a different wing of politics.
It's interesting. Politico asked a bunch of Democratic politicians running for president or who might run for president if they would ever do his podcast. And the only two Jews thinking about possibly running for president, Rahm Emanuel and Josh Shapiro, both suggested that they might be willing to.
I think this gets to something important with this debate in Michigan. It's different to go onto his podcast and joust over ideas. I think seeing Josh Shapiro and Hasan Piker on his Twitch stream would be fascinating. I think Josh Shapiro is smart and they would have a spirited debate, as we say in politics. The difference is going out to campaign with somebody and the candidate, it's implicitly endorsing his views or suggesting, why don't you come to Michigan and campaign with me? That's the difference. I think candidates should be able to go on to podcasts with people who disagree with them. But yeah, I mean, the politics of Israel heading into 2028 are going to be fascinating. You're already seeing tons of Democrats kind of come out against AIPAC, but also defending Israel. Gavin Newsom obviously had to walk back, calling Israel an apartheid state. The other thing that's a factor here, the more Democrats engage with influencers heading into 2028, they're going to have to confront some views, things they might have said in the past.
Quick one-sentence final thoughts on this. You worried about the direction of the Democratic Party?
I'm worried. I agree that they should be able to debate, but they have to come in clear-eyed and know that they're there to debate and push back on these bad ideas, not to get chummy and have a fun conversation.
Thanks so much for being here. Great. What a great time to be in LA to have you both in studio. Really amazing.
Thanks, Jay.
The U.S. Army is